If done right, the horror genre can be the resting place of some of the most nerve-wracking cinema experiences that will haunt viewers to their very core. Films like Hereditary, Don't Look Now, and The Exorcist are just a small handful of what's possible when every aspect of the filmmaking comes together to deliver a single terrifying vision. On the other hand, however, whenever things go wrong or some things don't work quite how they are intended, everything can come crashing down, with all traces of terror devolving into tedium or hilarity. Whether it's the result of predictable scares, an uninspired script, shoddy effects, or some horrifying acting, it doesn't take much for a horror film to fall flat on its face. Unfortunately, many mainstream horror releases tend to be more in line with the latter. Low-budget, cheap thrills to earn a profit, there's rarely any value to be found in them, but even the most atrocious horror movies can have one shining light of talent in the form of a great actor trying to make the most of a bad situation. Forever trapped in the frames of these flops, here are the actors that won't be including these films on their resumes. I'm Jess for What Culture, here are great actors trapped in awful horror movies. Anthony Hopkins, The Rite. Winning an Oscar for portraying the menacing Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, acting veteran Sir Anthony Hopkins has forever immortalized himself as a horror icon. Unfortunately, though, his legendary horror status doesn't reach far beyond the role of the cannibal doctor. Case in point, Father Lucas Trevant in horrific exorcism film The Rite. Loosely based on a book that's based on the alleged witness accounts of an apprentice exorcist in Rome, this film follows a young priest skeptical about their faith, sent to attend an exorcism seminar in Rome. It's here he meets Father Lucas to witness demonic possession firsthand in the hopes it will restore his faith. While the film received a positive reaction from the Catholic Church for its depiction of faith, The Rite wasn't so warmly greeted by general audiences or critics. Panned for its overly drawn-out pacing, lack of fear factor, and O'Donoghue's flat performance, The Rite is underwhelming in almost every sense. The only good thing about this film is Hopkins, whose performance was praised across the board. Coming to an explosive frenzy during a climactic possession scene, the Welsh actor proved he's still a powerful and commanding screen presence to behold. Olivia Wilde and Mark Duplass, The Lazarus Effect. Co-written by one of the writers who gave us 2015's Fantastic Four and directed by documentary filmmaker David Gelb, The Lazarus Effect is a low-budget sci-fi horror movie that attempted to highlight the dangers of playing God. Critically destroyed on its release, this film saw husband and wife scientists Frank, Mark Duplass, and Zoe, Olivia Wilde, create a concoction that has the power to bring living things back from the dead. And when Zoe befalls a fatal accident, Frank decides to use the miracle-making substance on her. But has Zoe's undead body been possessed by a demon, or is her newly found telekinetic powers and murderous behavior the result of a scientific phenomena? Complete with lazy scares, bland visuals, and an overdone pseudo-scientific premise that's more yawn than scream-inducing, there's no reason why anyone should subject themselves to this messy horror. Considering how great the chemistry is between Duplass and Wilde throughout the film, The Lazarus Effect feels like an even bigger misfire. These two really appear to care about each other, while Wilde delivers a commendably chilling performance as events continue to escalate. Had the script and direction been tighter, these actors could have made this film much more effective. Rooney Mara, A Nightmare on Elm Street. One of the most beloved and influential slasher series to ever hit the screen, Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street and its subsequent sequels are essential viewing for horror fans, even Freddy vs. Jason. However, one entry that's best skipped over is the 2010 remake of the same name. The only feature film helmed by prolific music video director Samuel Bayer, this was yet another example of a disastrous Hollywood horror remake. Replacing Robert Englund with Rorschach actor Jackie Earle Haley as the razor-fingered killer, this iteration attempted to take the series back to its horror roots, away from the campy quips of Freddy in the previous entries. A noble attempt in itself, the finished result proved to be nothing more than a by-the-numbers horror that retraced many of the same steps as Craven's original. Whilst Oscar-winning Hartley earned a generally positive reception from fans for his malevolent performance, alongside earning the approval of Englund himself, many seem to forget that the role of final girl Nancy went to two-time Oscar-nominated actor Rooney Mara in one of her early roles. Though the screenplay didn't allow her Nancy to be as memorable as Langenkamp's, Mara's talent still shone through nonetheless. Christian Stewart, The Messengers. She may well be best known for starring in the Twilight series, but much like her co-star Robert Pattinson, Kristen Stewart has shown film fans what she's really capable of, with her role in Personal Shopper blowing audiences and critics away. One role the actor would perhaps like to forget more than the Twilight series, however, is likely that of 2007's The Messengers. Produced by horror legend Sam Raimi, this film is your typical haunted house horror. The fractured Solomon family move to a creepy farmhouse in hopes of finding a new life. But when strange spooks start occurring, their teenage daughter Jess, played by Stewart, must figure out the root of the evil presence. Originally intended to be a film about a supernatural scarecrow, an idea that was eventually turned into a prequel film, The Messengers is just as bland and predictable as you'd expect, despite making a sizable profit at the box office. None of the scares are effective, and many viewers will likely see the twist ending coming straight away. And even though Stewart's character is almost as obnoxious as Bella, it's clear that Stewart is making a noticeable effort to make this unlikable character likable. Michael Caine, Jaws: The Revenge. Leagues apart from Steven Spielberg's 1975 classic, the Jaws sequels were famously unable to match the tension and suspense of the original. And the cherry on top of these shipwrecks of sequels is undoubtedly Jaws: The Revenge, one of the lowest rated movies on IMDb and hailed as one of the worst sequels ever made. The fourth installment in this franchise follows the utterly ridiculous premise of a shark that follows the remaining members of the Brody family to the Bahamas for their Christmas getaway to seek out some form of personal vengeance. It's full of numerous logical inconsistencies, steals shots from the original film, and is thoroughly mocked and derided for these reasons. It's somewhat surprising then that one of the film's stars was Sir Michael Caine, who had just won an Oscar for his performance in Hannah and Her Sisters. Unable to collect his Oscar because he was working on this film, Caine would go on to enjoy plenty of highs throughout his career, but he'll always be remembered for this huge stinker for all the wrong reasons. Even he admits that he's never actually seen the film. Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Frequently cited as one of the earliest examples of the slasher, Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a huge landmark in horror cinema that still gets plenty of admiration from fans and film scholars alike. Like all recognizable and profitable names though, this grotty exploitation flick spawned a series of sequels over the years. Like most other horror franchises, each sequel gradually got worse, with the fourth film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, marking a distinctive low point in horror. Written and directed by Kim Hankel, who co-wrote the original film's screenplay with Hooper, the film was originally titled The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but was shelved by the studio for 2 years. It was only after its main stars Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger gained mainstream popularity that the film was recut and released under the new name. This time we get to see a group of high school students on their way to prom when their car crashes and they find themselves at the mercy of a deranged Texan family. While both actors would eventually go on to win Academy Awards, their performances here go beyond over the top. McConaughey especially gives the most ridiculous performance of his career. Sir Ben Kingsley, BloodRayne. Video game movies are well known for being some of the most awful film adaptations ever put to screen. And for this well-earned reputation, we can thank infamous multi-Razzie award-winning filmmaker Uwe Boll for giving us the likes of Alone in the Dark, Postal, Far Cry, and perhaps his worst yet, BloodRayne. Winning 4 Stinker Bad Movie Awards and nominated for a whopping 6 Razzies, BloodRayne is very loosely based on the game of the same name, as it follows titular Dhampir Rain joining forces with a group of vampire hunters to seek vengeance on her vampire father after he kills her human mother. And her bloodthirsty father is played by none other than Academy Award-winning screen legend Ben Kingsley, also featuring the likes of Billy Zane, Michael Madsen, and a fabulously over-the-top Meatloaf. BloodRayne is yet another one of Boll's films that finds itself as one of the worst-rated films of all time. Universally panned by critics, ridiculed by the video game's voice actor Laura Bailey, and criticized over hiring actual prostitutes instead of actors for one scene, there's no doubt that this is the low point in Kingsley's career. At least he isn't on screen for too long. Finn Wolfhard, The Turning. then Wolfhard has shown himself to be a very capable and talented performer with a bright career ahead of him. Starring in an adaptation of Henry James's The Turn of the Screw that was at the time being executive produced by Steven Spielberg, it looked that Wolfhard could have another horror win on his hands with The Turning. But if the fact that Spielberg left during production doesn't speak volumes of the disaster that awaits, then nothing will. Following the same general premise of the chilling novel, The Turning sees a newly hired governess arrive at a large Gothic estate to look after two strange children, one of which is played by Wolfhard, as supernatural events begin to take place. But with shoddy pacing that's mostly set up, lackluster performances, bland scares, and a rushed ending that's been described as one of the worst horror movie finales on screen, this monumental disappointment is unable to live up to the standards of its source material or cast. If you want a chilling adaptation of this ghost story, then you should watch The Innocents instead. Lin Shaye, The Grudge. With some of her earliest roles being 1983's Alone in the Dark, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Critters, Lin Shaye's prolific and varied career has never strayed too far from horror. A prominent part of the Insidious series, Shaye has illustrated that she's still one of the genre's queens. Not all of her films have been successes though. While the underwhelming Insidious: The Last Key could have just as easily taken this spot on the list, the film that's more unsuited for her talents is the 2020 remake of The Grudge. Following in the footsteps of plenty of other misguided American adaptations of Japanese horror classics, this sidequel that takes place before and during the previous American installments of the franchise likewise failed to capture the atmosphere that made the story of vengeful spirits so effective. Despite being co-produced by Sam Raimi, the film failed to impress many who saw it. Heavily criticized for its monotonous pacing and overall dullness, the gruesome practical effects weren't enough to save this dud. Nevertheless, Shaye is once again at the top of her game, giving a performance that's immensely enjoyable to watch in a film that will ultimately be a small footnote in her career. Robert De Niro, Hide and Seek. Starring in cinematic classics including Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and The Godfather Part 2, two-time Oscar-winning actor Robert De Niro is one of the most recognizable and celebrated performers working today. And with a versatile career spanning drama, comedy, and horror, his talents have no limits. However, while he's had success in the horror genre with the likes of Angel Heart and Cape Fear, his other spooky ventures have been less successful, with his last foray into the genre in Hide and Seek arguably being his worst. Also starring a young Dakota Fanning, Hide and Seek sees De Niro as widower David Calloway, who moves home with his daughter Emily, played by Fanning. It's at this point Emily forms a bond with an imaginary friend named Charlie, and events take a sinister and murderous turn. While both Fanning and De Niro both received some praise for their performances, the rest of the film wasn't met so warmly, with many critics citing the illogical leaps in the final act as the final nail in this derivative psychological thriller's coffin. Thankfully, both of these actors have done far better things in the years since. This is one horror film you should not seek out.
Olivia Cooke, Ouija. In 2014, she had the lead role in Ouija, the first film in the Ouija series, which focuses on a group of friends playing with a, you guessed it, Ouija board and awakening ancient evil spirits. Although the film was a commercial success, it received many mixed reviews from fans and was slaughtered by critics. They cited that one of the main downfalls was its average plot, which consisted of silly characters making rage-inducing mistakes. It worked as a fairly run-of-the-mill horror movie with a few decent scares along the way, but was nothing too memorable or exciting. In all fairness to Cooke, she gave a good performance as the star, but the material, well, it just wasn't there. Julie Bowen, An American Werewolf in Paris. Julie Bowen is a beautiful and incredibly talented actress, best known for her role as Claire Dunphy in Modern Family, who, ironically, is an avid fan of the horror genre and would be surely disappointed in the outcome of this film. Only 5 years into her career, she had a supporting role in the 1997 film An American Werewolf in Paris, a sequel to An American Werewolf in London. With a relatively unassuming plot of an American man in Paris getting involved with some French werewolves who can transform at will, it seemed to leave too much to be desired from the viewer, with many fans considering it a shameless cash grab following the success of the original. And it seemed to have even worse special effects despite being made 16 years after the original. Not only was the physical display bad, but the movie seemed to fancy itself a horror and a comedy, yet somehow missed the mark on both. Now, Bowen did a respectable job playing the role of Amy Finch, but we're just thankful that she eventually found her way to Modern Family. Chase Crawford, The Haunting of Molly Hartley. Chase Crawford rose to fame for playing his best-known role in the Amazon hit series The Boys. Fans loved Chase for his incredible performance as the Deep as he turned the character into an internet sensation. In 2008, during the early years of his acting, Crawford played one of the lead roles as Jason Young in The Haunting of Molly Hartley, a story focusing on a young girl who, after being attacked by her mother, transfers schools and gets the attention of one of the most popular boys, who has a sinister secret that will unveil her true legacy. With only mild commercial success, the film received tons of hatred from both critics and audiences alike, mainly due to the fact that it was in no way frightening. It contained a painfully predictable plot and cheap scares that failed to get viewers' attention, making it more of a soft thriller than a daring horror. Jennifer Love Hewitt, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. The 1998 slasher horror film I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is the second installment in the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise. Starring a fresh-faced Jennifer Love Hewitt, it continues from the first installment. Following a reasonably successful original, fans were excited to see what would come next in the series, but were left bereft of any worthwhile content, leading to tons of searing remarks stating that it was predictable and contrived, disengaging audiences from the moment it began. Now, some would say that it's hard to expect anything more from a movie with such a ridiculous title, but somehow this sequel found a way. Reviews were so bad that the first movie's director said that it was actually not the right story and killed the franchise, which was pretty scathing reviews from the man who started it all. Love Hewitt has since moved up in the acting world and onto more significant projects like Criminal Minds and 911, for which we can all be thankful. Winona Ryder, Lost Souls. Winona Ryder is a well-loved veteran actress who rose to fame in the early 90s. During the peak of her fame in 2000, Winona played the role of Maya Larkin in the horror/thriller Lost Souls. The story follows a Catholic teacher who meets an atheist journalist who is believed to be the next Antichrist. The movie bombed on release. With a budget of $50 million, it only made back $31.3 million worldwide, resulting in an $18.7 million loss. And this was for a good reason as well, as the movie lacked any real substance and critics tore it apart, finding the overuse of exorcisms and the devil grotesque and gimmicky. Even with that, there were few scares to be found, barely qualifying this as a horror. Despite the hate that the movie got, people seemed okay with Winona's performance, believing that she brought great conviction to her character through an intense and focused attitude. Hilary Swank, The Reaping. Horror movies based on religion are always tricky. In an attempt to scare, it is easy to become either gimmicky or shallow, and in the case of the 2007 film The Reaping, it was somehow both. Hilary Swank plays a missionary whose family was tragically killed, so she then embarks on a journey to disprove religious phenomena. However, her plan changes when she stumbles upon a small town under attack by biblical plagues. The film was relatively well liked by audiences, but panned by critics. Unable to bring any real story to the screen in a schlocky and convoluted mess of a film, it constantly overindulges in satanic horror, which despite its efforts provides nothing for audiences to care about or actually get scared over. The film was also made up of other talented stars such as Idris Elba and David Morrissey, but even this ensemble couldn't really bring any character to the film. And on top of this, Swank delivered a lukewarm performance in a role that she was most likely quick to forget. Lindsay Lohan, Among the Shadows. Lindsay Lohan started her career as a promising young star, with her first significant lead in the 1998 film The Parent Trap, later moving on to her most renowned role as Katie Heron in Mean Girls. Now, in her return to acting after a long hiatus, she's been featured in a supernatural horror thriller called Among the Shadows. Produced in 2019, the story follows a werewolf detective on a mission to uncover the mystery behind her uncle's death whilst attempting to hide her true identity. Upon release, viewers, of which there were hardly any, were shocked by the appalling quality of this film. From start to finish, it was a disaster, with senseless dialogue, a lack of structure, and bad editing that made many people just switch off entirely. Another odd letdown came from the absence of any real werewolf transformations, only providing glowing eyes and plastic fangs. This is surprising considering the $12 million budget, which apparently went towards no part of the film's actual production. However, Lohan received praise from the producer Ross Ottoman, who said that she was a professional and can carry pretty much any role that she wants to, although let's face it, Ottoman is the most likely one to actually believe that the film is any good. Kate Beckinsale, The Disappointments Room. Now, Kate Beckinsale is an acting icon, primarily known for her roles in the Underworld series and in Van Helsing, and over the years she has worked hard and proven her gold status in the acting world. But in 2016, The Disappointments Room was released with Beckinsale as the star, who played Dana, a mother. She, alongside her son, moves into an isolated country manor and fights against horrors that were released from the attic. From the moment it first screened, it was considered a failure, coming across as just another average haunted house horror movie that brought nothing new to the world of horror and nothing for audiences to get excited over. But the reviews, well, they speak for themselves. Having a whopping 0% critic score and a 16% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, it's fair to say that viewers were, ironically, severely disappointed. Samuel L. Jackson, Cell. A man who needs no introduction, Samuel L. Jackson, one of the world's most famous actors whose films grossed over $14 billion. He's hailed as one of the greatest actors of our time, so it leaves us to wonder why he found himself in what is considered one of his worst films. Produced in 2016 and based on Stephen King's novel Cell, the story follows a novelist on a search to find his estranged wife and son after a signal broadcasting over New England starts turning humans into savages. Reaching an average score of 3.9 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes and a 38 out of 100 on Metacritic, the ultimate failure was put down to the terrible craftsmanship by director Todd Williams, who relied too heavily on boring zombie cliches, creating an absence of any real suspense or depth. When you have a film created by Stephen King, the best horror writer ever arguably, and with a cast containing Samuel L. Jackson, it begs the question on how you've got such a brilliantly talented and experienced team and still managed to mess up this badly. Unsurprisingly though, Jackson puts his all into the role and delivered another strong performance. If it wasn't the director's poor understanding of the book, we might actually be viewing another classic here. Naomi Watts, Goodnight Mommy. Famed British actress and Oscar nominee Naomi Watts is continuously celebrated for her talent and grace. Best known for her roles in King Kong, The Impossible and Birdman, she is a delight to have on screen, even when she starred in the Goodnight Mommy. Twin brothers arrive at their mother's house, and terrified by her strange appearance, they suspect that the woman under the bandages may not be who she says she is. This remake was quickly seen as a pointless, second-rate letdown, far inferior to the original, and it removed everything fans once loved and replaced it with meager writing and dissatisfying shocks. However, in an exciting turn of events, the Goodnight Mommy redo is liked by critics even more so than the audiences, even if it is marginally, as it received a 37% critic score compared to the 33% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, and according to IMDb, it is one of the least popular movies produced in 2022, so at least it's got that going for it, right? Nevertheless, as always, Watts was praised for her terrific performance, paying homage to the original and bringing back to life the dramatic and terrifying performance of Suzanne West.